Okay, we're up to the Mishnah on Yud Tesam and Aleph. Derech Hakdama, I think you're familiar with it, but we'll go over it anyway. There are kabbanas that are chiyuvim that you have to bring, and the kabbanas that you don't have to bring. The kabbanas that you don't have to bring are called nedav and nedavos. Primarily, there are two types of kabbanas. There are a carbon oila and a carbon shlamim. Within the shlamim family, there's something called a toida, which of course is a shlamim, except it's only eaten for a day and a night as opposed to 2 days and a night, and it's accompanied by 40 loaves of bread. The carbon chayva that you have generally is, if it's not a sin offering or a guilt offering, a chatos or an asham, it's something that's brought machmas the regel. So when you oil the regel, you have to bring two kabbanas. You have to bring a oilus re'iyah, and you have to bring a shalmei chagiga. That everyone has to bring. If you have enough meat to eat from the shalmei chagiga, that would suffice. If you don't have enough meat to eat, then you bring something called the shalmei simcha, because ein simcha ela bebasa. B'shas, the Beis Hamikdash existed, ein simcha ela bebasa biyayin. B'zman hazeh, we say ein simcha ela biyayin. Simcha only what? Biyayin. However, there are shitas. The Rambam's shitas, also basa biyayin, Yamshel Shlomo, shitas bebasa. So we are very, very easily in this group machmir and say, great, there is simcha bebasa, right? That, but the us is the shalmei simcha and the carbon oilus re'iyah. So we're going to have a machloikis in the Mishnah whether, believe it or not, whether the oilus re'iyah is brought on the first day of Yontif or not, because an oilus re'iyah is not eaten, and on Yontif you need to bring is eichel nefesh. The heter is eichel nefesh. So, fascinating halacha by what? By, as we're about to embark upon. So, says the Mishnah, Yud Tesam and Aleph. Let's get Rabbi Rosenzweig in here. Okay, Yud Tesam and Aleph. Beis Shammai Yoimrim. Beis Shammai says, Mevi and Shlamim, you bring the Shlamim, ve'ein samcham aleihem. But you can't do smicha, you can't put your two hands on it. Smicha require you to go ahead and with all your might push down on the animal, and it's muktzah, you're not meshamash v'balei chayim, you may come to ride on them. So therefore, we do not do smicha according to Beis Shammai, and that's a carbon shlamim, only a shlamim, because a shlamim can be eaten, and since it can be eaten, therefore what? There's a tzarech of oichel nefesh. Avaloi oilis, the carbon oilus re'iyah you would not bring, despite the fact that it's a chiyuv, and despite the fact that it's kaveh zman, nonetheless, you would not bring it. Now, question, like Beis Shammai guys, when would you bring it? If you don't bring it the first day of Yontif, when would you bring it? So you have what's called tashlumim. You have all 7 days of Yontif to bring the animal. And even by Atzeres, even by the Shavuos, which is only 1 day, nonetheless you would have, as we learned many times, you have 7 days of tashlumim. So Beis Shammai shita, you could bring the shalmei chagiga, because you could eat it. You can't do smicha, but you can't bring the oilus re'iyah on Yontif proper. Ubeis Loimim, Mevi'in Shlamim v'oilos, you bring both. V'samcham aleim, you do smicha. Says Beis Hillel, you bring both. You bring the carbon oilus re'iyah and the shalmei chagiga. So even though it's not eichel nefesh, you do bring it, and even though it's a balchai, you could do smicha. So two machloikasin: one, whether you do smicha or not, and two, whether you bring the oilus re'iyah or not. But everyone's moidi, you bring the shalmei chagiga. What about guys shalmei nedava? What about oilus nedava? What about that? So therefore, we're going to see a machloikis in the Gemara. Okay. Says the Gemara, Ama Ula, says a Ula, machloikis, the machloikis is between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, is b'shalmei chagiga lismoich, whether you do smicha on the shalmei chagiga, v'oilus re'iyah lekorev, and whether you bring the oilus re'iyah. Beis Shammai says you do not bring the oilus re'iyah, and you don't do smicha even though you bring the shalmei chagiga. And Beis Hillel says you do bring the oilus re'iyah, and you do smicha on the shalmei chagiga. As we said so succinctly and clearly, the Beis Shammai savri, what does Beis Shammai hold? The chagoisem oisoi chag Hashem, and you should go ahead and be choig chag Hashem. What does chag mean? Chagiga, right? Chagiga, guys. Remember we spoke out. You might remember that we make a tzushtel, a sukkah to a carbon chagiga, just like the chagiga is asa b'hana, the sukkah is asa b'hana. Right? We spoke about that. Chagiga in Oilus Re'iyah says the Beis Shammai, it's a chidush that what we have a Xeris Akosiv. You do not bring the Oilus Re'iyah on Yontif. When do you bring it? The other 7 days, the other 6 days of Tashlumim, that's when you bring. Chalamoid, on Chalamoid, you bring the Oilus Re'iyah. That's Beis Shammai. On Chalamoid, you bring it. But believe it or not, on the first day of Yontif, says Beis Shammai, we have a pasuk, you do not bring the Oilus Re'iyah. Beis Hillel survey, it says La Hashem, the word Hashem is extra. Called the La Hashem, anything that's La Hashem. The Oilus Re'iyah and the Shalmei Chagiga. The Oilus Re'iyah is Lashem. You bring it on the first day of Yontif, despite the fact that there's no Oichel Nefesh by the Oilus Re'iyah because it's totally burnt. Avol Nedarim v'Nedavos, regarding karbonis that you donate, right? Nedarim v'Nedavos, I want to bring an oil, I want Harizu, a neder, Harialaya, a Nedava, Harizu, then there be a Kolein Kraven B'Yontif. Wula says, everyone holds you do not bring B'Yontif. And so too says Rav Ada Barava, the Nedarim v'Nedavos ain't craving b'Yontif. You would not bring a neder and dava on Yontif Papa, even though you could eat the shlamim, even though you could eat it, you do not bring it on. Since you could bring it other days, you don't bring it on Yontif. So just to reiterate, Oilus Re'iyah Machloikis, whether you bring or not, Beis Shammai no, Beis Hillel yes, Shalmei Chagiga everyone else you do bring. Machloikis is by smicha. Shalmei Nedarim and Nedavos, everyone holds. Say according to Ula, say according to Rabbi Ada Bar Ava, you do not bring on Yontif Shalmei Nedarim and Nedavos. Meisavei, I'll show you an opinion that says you do bring it. Meisavei, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Leinechlu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, Al Oila She'ena Shel Yontif, an Oila that's not of Yontif. That's an Oilus Nedava, guys, right? Oila not of Yontif, and Oilus Nedava, She'ena Kreva b'Yontif. You don't bring that on Yontif. An Oilus Nedava, you don't bring on Yontif, you can't eat it. V'al Shlomim, She'en Shel Yontif, She'kreven b'Yontif. And a Shlomim, Chagiga, that is Yontif, meaning it's a Chayva, you would bring. Aman Nechelku, where's the Machlokes? Al Oila Shehi Shel Yontif. On an Oila of Yontif, that's the Oilus Re'iyah. V'al Shlomim, She'ena Shel Yontif. And they argue where the shlomim that's not a yontif. Guys, here's the key. A shlomim that's not a yontif is a neder and a dava. Shlomim she'ena shel yontif. It's not a chagiga. It's not a chiyuv. It's she'ena shel yontif. It's a neder and a dava. And they argue, meaning it's not divrei hakol. You don't bring it like Ula and Rav Ada Barava. It's what? It's a tana. And they can't go up against a Tana. It's a Mesiveh. It's an upslug on Ula and Rav Ada Barava. We have a Mefurish Tana that says you could bring a shlamim of what? Of a Nedava according to Beis Hillel. Kasha Ula, Kasha Rav Ada Barava from a Tana. Beis Shammai Yomim Lo Yavi, Beis Hillel Yomim Yavi. Okay, very nice. We got the Kasha. Tiritz ve'ema hachi. So let's give a teretz and say the following. Rav Shimon ben Elazar, we're going to just go ahead and tinker a little bit. I think it's a big yisoid. You know, we very seldom tinker with a Mishnah. When Rebbe codified and brought down everything, he was very mudiyak to bring the correct text. Remember, this is Torah Shel Bapeh. It's Torah Shel Bapeh. Why did something remain baraisa from the lashon of outside? Because they weren't sure of the text. So if push comes to shove, and we have an opinion that ostensibly makes sense, it could be that in fact, the Bryce is not correct. So we often have Mukhlefis Hashita, switch around the order, and now we say, edit it a little, let's make it fit. I mean, there are people who do not like this, right? There are, Uncle Elliot of blessed memory and Mendy, they don't like this tinkering. But if you think of it in context of what it is, a brisa of the historical events that brought about the Hefer Torascha to go ahead and bring down the Torah Shel Bapeh, it does make a little sense if you view it in that context. So over here, we have a difficulty. It really, why in the world should we be able to bring a neder and a dove on Yontif? If Ula says there's no machlokes, Rabbi says no machlokes, I have a Tanis as machlokes, that Tanis of a brisa, it's possible that brisa is not correct. Okay?
Don't we say Chasuri Mechsura by Mishnayos so pretty often?
By Mishnayos, Chasuri Mechsura does not mean that you didn't tinker with it, you just left out words. You didn't tinker with it, you didn't correct the text, you filled in the gaps. We spoke at that beautiful, we spoke at a chamuke yurakayach. Just like the Torah is besesa, we said chamuke is chesuri mechsur v'hachi katani, right? That was the way that they hid the Torah. They hid the Torah by leaving out words. That was a beautiful shot we spoke out in at the end of Masech the Sukkah. Chamuke yurakayach, right? Chamuke chesuri mechsur v'hachi katani. Okay, anyway, but tinkering, you're going to see with changing, with fine tuning and changing around. It's funny when you learn Gemara and you learn it enough. Kind of makes sense, all the things that look, the little thing the pishuk I gave you now. I never knew this, you may change. If you put it in perspective, it's very interesting how often it just makes much more sense because you learn enough and you have a means of contrast and comparing and looking at a more universal view, and it just makes much more sense rather than okay, I'm just making it fit, In yeshiva, you just made it fit. It does so you sit there cynically and saying, yeah. But here, if you look at it that way, the difference in a brisa and a mishnah, it's considerably it's special. Okay, anyway, with that in mind, so tiritz ve'emahachi, we're going to change the brisa, guys. Amrav Shimon Elazar lo nechalku. Watch for the change. Again, the change is that you don't bring a neder and a dava, right? We want to change that you do not bring a shalmei and a dava. That's what you want to do. That you don't bring shalmei and a dava. That's it. One word. Not you inserted the word shlamim. Right? Which is the same as before. Ushlamim she'ena shel yantif. They're not yantif. They're not chiyuvim. They are what? They are a neda or a nedava. She'ena krevim. Now that's ula and ravada barava. But Shlamim she'ena shel yantif, but Shlamim she'ena shel yantif she'krevim b'yantif. A Shlamim she'en shel yantif, a Shlamim that is of yantif, means it's a Shalmei chagiga is yantif that you bring. Amal nechelku al oila shehi shel yantif on the oila shel yantif. Shebishami says lo yavi, you don't bring the oilas riyah. Ubeis hil loimim yavi, you do bring the oilas riyah. Okay, so therefore, everyone right now, everyone's happy. We made Rav Shimon Elazar shtim with Ula and shtim with Rav Adam Arava that you do not bring a shlamim on of Nedava on Yantif.
They just changed the bright. This wasn't the Mishnah they changed. This was the Brisa they changed.
Of course, the Brisa. That's what I spoke out.
Right.
Of course, they're tinkering with a Brisa. Rav Ada and Ula Avi said the Pshan in the Mishnah. They explained the Mishnah. They elaborated upon the Mishnah. The Mishnah is correct. You have a kash on them from the brisa, they just tinker with the brisa. And we explained why you can tinker with the brisa. Now, Rabbi Yosef says, guys, when are we going to tinker with the brisa? Only last resort. We know also in our learning that the Amoraim, they want to come out according to everybody. They want to be universally, they want to come according to all Tanoim. Failure to come out according to everybody, as long as they have a Tana that supports them, they can argue on another Tana because they're agreeing with one. So therefore, if I could find a Tana who holds a Nedav and a Dava is brought on Yontif, right? Or is not brought on Yontif, then you don't tinker with the Brisa, and we have Machlokes Tanoim. Rav Shimon ben Elazar says you would bring a Shamik a Neder on Yontif, and we have another Brisa that says you don't. And Ula and Rav Ada hold like that other Tana. So why are you going ahead and editing and tinkering with a Brisa when it's much more pashit? Keep that intact, and we have a Tana that argues on that Brisa, and Rav Ula and Rav Ada go according to that Tana, which the Gemara is about to do right now. Rabbi Yosef Amar Tanoi Shokas Me'alma. Did you go ahead and are you removing all the Tanoim from the world? All of a sudden you're tinkering with a brisa? Tanoihi. It's the machlokes Tanoim where the neder and the dava can be brought on Yontif. The Tani, watch. Shlomim haba machmas Yontif, that's a shalmei chagiga. B'Yontif. Be'shamay yoimim, soimech aleim, you do smicha. Me'erev Yontif, v'shechtim. You don't need smicha at the same time as shchita, and go ahead and do it before and shecht it on Yontif. You could do a take of the smicha shchita. You could even do smicha on yantiv, which was the machlokes in our Mishnah, right? Whether you could do smicha on the shlamim or not. V'shaychna b'yantiv amid beis avol nidarim v'nidavos divrei akol ein kreiven b'yantiv. There it is, guys. Openly.
Very cool.
This is a Tana. Aval neder v'nedava, you can't bring on Yantif. Who holds like that? Ula. Who holds like that? Rav Ada Barava. So don't tinker with a brisa that says you could bring it on Yantif. It's a machlokes Tanayim, says the top Rashi. Aval neder v'nedavais. V'ula deka'amar ki'ai Tana. And Ula said his din according to that Tana, and keep the first brisa intact, and don't go ahead and edit and reconstruct it. Guys, good? Okay, guys, now the next piece of Gemara is very strange. It's going to take off the rest of the daf, like this, to bring in a machloikis tanoim, whether nedav and nedava are craven beyontif. But in other words, it's very long-winded, but the bottom line is we only need the end. In the end, we're going to see this, the machloikis tanoim, whether a neder and nedava could be brought on yontif or not. That's what's going to be. Along the way, however, we have to introduce the concept of Baal Ta'acher. So to that end, here you go. Now, this is speaking about the on Yontif. It's speaking in Parshas Re'eh. It's discussing the different halachos. And it says, and it's speaking in Sukkos, guys. You're holding by Sukkos. You explain Pesach, you explain Shavuos, and now you're holding in Sukkos. And it says the following: Shivas yamim tachv Hashem Elokecha, b'makam asher yivchar Hashem, ki yivrecha Hashem Elokecha, b'chol tevascha, b'chol ma'aseh yedecha, v'yisach sameach. Mamish, this is this time of the year, guys, right now, telling us as we go up to the Beis Hamikdash, 6-7 days, we're going to be HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shloisha pamim b'shana, 3 times a year. Yeira kol sechurcha, you should be seen as Pnei Hashem Elokecha, b'makam asher yivchar, b'chag hamatzos, b'chag hashvuos, b'chag hasukos. Why are you going ahead and telling us Chag HaSukkos? We're in Chag HaSukkos. Once you said 3 times, I know it. In other words, in context, it's speaking about Sukkos. It should just say Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos. And since I'm speaking about Sukkos, that should be included. So the fact that Sukkos is stated over here, we can learn out a special halacha. And here's the Mishnah of Elisriya, Leiroches Pnei Hashem Reikam. We're going to learn out a fascinating halacha. We're going to have machlokes. There is a halacha in the Torah of Leisa'ach L'Shalmai. If you make a neder or a nedava, do not be delayed in bringing it. We're going to see a Gemara in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah pretty soon, and we're going to see it today. There's a machlokes exactly how Baal Ta'acher works. Is it right away? You have one regel to bring it and you don't. Is it 3 regalim consecutively, no matter when you make it? So if I make it in Sukkot, it's Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos. If it's Shavuos, it's Shavuos, Sukkot, Pesach. Or no, you need Dafka Seder, you need an order. And the order is you always bring Chag HaMatzos. So do you need the order of what? Of Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. So therefore, if I make my neder in Sukkah, I'd only be able, I get Sukkot, Pesach, and then the other 3, because I need consecutive. And then you need Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. You'd only be over after 5 regalim. That's if you need Kiseder. The Seder meaning beginning with Pesach. If you'd make them after Shavuos, it would be 3. If you make it Pesach, it'd be 4. So that's the machlokes. So that's the idea we need for this Gemara, the din of Baal Ta'acher. Again, so long-winded brisa, machlokes Tanoim. In the end of the brisa, we're going to bring in whether you can bring a neder and a dava on Yontif, which is what we want to know, and we need the idea of Baal Ta'acher to understand the brisa. Good, very good. Says the Gemara, V'hani Tanoi, and these machlokes Tanoim, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and the brisa that we just brought, whether you bring a neder and a dava on Yontif, in fact, this machlokes over the Tanoim. Kihani Tanoi, the Tanya. Ein mevi'in toida b'chag hamatzos. Obviously, you can't bring a toida and chag hamatzos from chomet sheba. We all know by now that accompanying the carbon toida with 40 loaves, 10 of those loaves, or 30 were matzah and 10 were chametz. So there's no way you could bring a carbon toida on Pesach. V'loy ba'atzeres, and you can't bring it on atzeres b'fnei shu yontif, because you can't bring a neder and a dav on yontif. You can't bring an atzeres, it's a neder and a dav, you can't bring it on yontif. Well, maybe adam toidasei b'chag sukkos. You could bring it on sukkos. The Gemara is going to ask, isn't sukkos a yontif also? Okay, Be'ez Hashem will get there. Okay, that's the first opinion. Again, we're going to go over this brisa very well. So the first brisa states clearly the first part. You can't bring it on Pesach, you can't bring it on Shavuos, but you can bring it on Sukkot. Rav Shimon Omer, Harioim, it says b'chag hamatzos u'b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos. It says that kol sheba b'chag hamatzos u'b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos. Anything that can be born on matzos can be born on Shavuos, can be born on Sukkos. B'chol shloi ba b'chag hamatzos. Anything that can't be born on chag hamatzos on Pesach, ain't ba b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos. Rav Elazar Shimon Omer, no. Maybe Adam Taydasle b'chag hasukkos. V'yoytze b'dei chavasle mishum simcha. You can bring it on Yontif, on Sukkos. Your yoytze, your mitzvah of shalmei simcha. Being yoytze by mishum chagiga, but you can't be yoytze chagiga. Okay, we're going to get back to this whole brisa now. Omamar, as we know by now, what does Omamar mean? We're going over the brisa that just be stated, right? That's what Omamar means. That's what your Rebbe never taught you in yeshiva. That this Rebbe did teach you. Omamar, you're going back over the brisa now. Omamar, ein meivin toida b'chag hamatzos. Mifnei chametz sheba. There's no pshita. What's the chiddush, right? What's the chiddush? What's the chiddush? So Amar Rav Ada says Rav Ada bereid Rav Yitzchak the imila Rav Shmuel bar Abba hacha be'arba asa askinon. You know what we're speaking about? We're speaking about the 14th day. Erev Pesach. Chametz is permitted, at least in the morning. So what's the chiddush? Outside. Really, you're allowed to eat this for a day and a night. We know you can't eat chametz after what? Right? You know, machloikas, 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, whatever, you can't eat it. So if you're going to bring it, you're going to bring kachim lebeis hapsul. You're bringing it, but you know you're going to have to burn it earlier. So therefore, that's the chiddush over here. You do not bring it, not on Pesach itself. The chiddush is you don't bring an erev Pesach. Why? Because you're going to be limiting the zman that you can eat the chametz. Because savar ein mevi'in kachim lebeis hapsul. You can't bring kachim. In this case, matzah chametz the beis hapsul. That's the first line. V'loy bat seres mifnei shu yantif. Kasavar the darim the davos ain't craving b'yantif. You can't bring neder v'neder on yantif. So therefore, a carbon toy the guys, which is a what? A carbon toida, which is a neder. You made a neder to bring a carbon toida. You can't bring on yantif. Ava maybe other toidaslei b'chag hasukkos, but you could bring it on sukkos. Now emas elam would be yantif atzmai on the first day of sukkos itself. It's much amazing, right? You hold mamish the Rabbi Rosenberg. There you go. Right, constantly. Va'amit v'loy bat seres mifnei shu yantif. Guys, why can't you bring it on Seres and Shavuos? It's Yontif. So you can bring it on Sukkos. Sukkos is not any different than Shavuos. They're both regalim. So if you can't bring it on Shavuos because it's a regel, you can't bring it on Sukkos because it's a regel. Right? You can't bring it then either. So what does it mean? It must mean El B'chol Shel Moed. It must be you could bring the Toida on Chol Moed. Rav Shimon Omer, Hari Omer. So that's the first part of the brisa. Let's go to the top and stick it in, okay? Let's go to the top. 2 lines from the top. The Tanya. What do we mean? It really means what on Erev Pesach. Why? Because you can bring kach in the Beis Hapsul. B'fnei chametz sheba. V'loy bat seres, you can't bring it on a seres because you can't bring neder v'nedarim on yantif. Aval maybe adam toidas b'chag hasukkos, you could bring in a chol hamoed. Good. That's what we learn. Now back in the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Hari Omer, it says, B'chag hamatzos, B'chag hashvuos, B'chag hasukkos. Kol sheba B'chag hamatzos, Ba B'chag hashvuos, B'chag hasukkos. V'chol shloi Ba B'chag hamatzos, Ein Ba B'chag hashvuos, B'chag hasukkos. So so therefore you can't bring it on sukkos either. Since you can't bring it what? He argues on the Tanakama. Tanakama says you could bring a cholosh hamoed. He says you can't bring a cholosh hamoed. Good. That's what he's saying. Now, Maskal Rabbi Zera, Hashta Saluse Misaltinon. Now you're able to go to work on Chol Hamoed. You can gather wood on Chol Hamoed. The Darn Davis Mi Boy, that you tell me that isn't it mutter to bring Chol Hamoed? In other words, the way you're touching up the opinion of Reb Shimon is since you can't bring fellas the Toida during the whole Yontiv of Pesach, including Chol Hamoed, you won't be able to bring it the whole Yontiv of Sukkot, including Chol Hamoed. But 1 second, I'm able to do avoid on Chol Hamoed. If it's a dava hefsid, I can gather wood, I can do things. So you won't be able to bring a neder and a dava. The svara doesn't make sense that that's the explanation of Reb Shimon. It's a nice corollary. Oh, you can't bring it on Pesach, you can't bring it on, but it doesn't make any sense. I should be able to bring a cholamoid a carbon. I can do menial work on if it's necessary on cholamoid. I can't bring a carbon to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Doesn't make sense. So that can't be the pshat. That can't be the pshat. Guys are good? That can't be the pshat. So what must be the pshat? Okay. Amar Abaya. Behakrava kuli amalei pligi deshari. Everyone, even Reb Shimon would say, Chalosh Shalmoy, you could bring what? The carbon taida. That's not what it means. When Reb Shimon said that anything that's bought by Pesach, you can bring bread and Shavuos and Sukkot, he didn't mean you can't bring it as a carbon. You could bring it as a carbon. Ki pligi, where do they argue? L'mekim alav b'bal ta'acher. They argue whether you're going to be over on bal ta'acher. At which point in time are you over bal ta'acher? Tanakama savar, sholish regolim amrachmana, afilu shaloi kisidron. So therefore, you know what? I better bring it on Sukkot, guys, because I could have a big problem. I can't bring it on what? On Pesach, it's chametz. I can't bring it on Shavuos, ein mevi and neder on Shavuos. So what does he tell you? You better bring it on cholamoid Sukkot. You know why? Because if you don't, you're going to be over Bal Tacher, and you don't need an order for Bal Tacher. You don't need Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, even if it's not in that order. So in other words, it's an Eitz Toiva. You better bring this. Let's say you go ahead and you make the you say, I'm going to bring it on Sukkot. Bring it on Sukkot. You know why? Because even if you don't bring it on Sukkot, what's going to happen? Guys, what's going to happen? You don't bring it on Sukkot. It's not Bal Tacher, it's only 1 month, correct? Comes Pesach, guess what? Can't bring it. Comes Shavuos, can't bring it. So therefore, Eitz Toiva, a good piece of advice. What should you do? Bring it on Sukkot. Bring it on Sukkot. Reb Shimon Savak Kesidron. No. Reb Shimon says it's Kesidron. In Shaloi Kesidron Loi. Rabbi Elazar Shimon Aimer, maybe Adam Taidasle B'Chag HaSukkos, Ema, Sinle B'Chol Shalom Moed, Hanatana Kama, El B'Yontif, Ukasava, Nidor Medam, Krave B'Yontif. Okay, guys, let's now stick it back in the Brisa. Let's go back to the Brisa. 2 lines from the top. Tanya. Eme V'Yin Toide B'Chag HaMatzos, V'Nechamet Sheba, V'Lei Batzeres Meishu Yontif. Avla maybe Adam Taidasle B'Chag HaSukkos. Bring it on Sukkot. It's an Eitz Toiva, bring it on Sukkot. You know why? Because you don't bring in Sukkot, you may have a problem about Ta'acha, guys. Since you can't bring it on Pesach and you can't bring it on Shavuos, you can have three regalim going by Shleik Sidron, and you have a problem about Ta'acha. Shimon says no. Hariyim it says B'Chag HaMatzos, B'Chag HaShavuos, B'Chag HaSukkos. You have time. Kol Sheba B'Chag HaMatzos, B'Chag HaShavuos, B'Chag HaSukkos. Kol Shlei B'Chag HaMatzos, Eina B'Chag HaShavuos, B'Chag HaSukkos. So you have time. You have time to bring the carbon because you need a seder. Maybe on Taidasa b'Chag HaSukkos. No, you can bring it on Sukkot itself. Why? Because Bal Ta'acher is even 1 month. Guys, Elazar Shimon says, guys, 1 month. You're over. Now, does he mean Chol Shel Moed? It can't mean Chol Shel Moed because that's the Tanakama. So what does it mean? You can bring it on Sukkot itself. Why can you bring it on Sukkot itself? Because you do bring the Darv and the Davos on Sukkot, on Yontif. That's your machloikis tanoim. That's your machloikis tanoim. The hani tanoi kahani tanoi. The one Madiyamu says that Tanakama is being cholish shel moed. Why? Guys, look at me. Why can I bring on Atzeres? Because you can't bring Nedav and Nedarim on Atzeres. Because he holds you can't bring Nedav and Nedarim on Yontif. Says Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. No. Says Elazar Reb Shimon. You could bring it on Sukkot. Which day in Sukkot? The first day. The first day. Why? Because you could bring Neder and Dharma on Yontif. That's the long-winded mouth. I told you it's a long-winded brisa to look for those 2 lines. So back inside. Rabbi Elazar Shimon Aimer, maybe Yodin Taidasei b'Chag HaSukkos. You can bring on Chag HaSukkos itself. Emas, what are we speaking about? Ilem b'Chol Shel Moed, Hainu Tanakama. Ella must be speaking the Yontif. Because Sava and Adar is craving the Yontif. Now, so question. So why do you pick Sukkot? Guys, why do you pick Sukkot? Why don't you pick Pesach or Toida couldn't pick Pesach, but Seres you could also bring it, right? Says the Gemara, Chag Sukkot, my Shna Chag Sukkot the Nakat Rosa B'Shimon, the Nakat Kama Rosa B'Shimon LeTamei. The Tanya B'Shimon Naima LaYom Chag Sukkot. Right? You don't say Chag Sukkot. What I showed you on the board, right? What I showed you on the screen. Don't say Chag Sukkot because you're speaking about that, right? You know it's Chag Sukkot. Shabbat because Medaber, because that was the context I was speaking about. That that's the last time. That the last one, that's the last one. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. No, Loima shezeh goyrim. That's goyrim. It's Sukkot that's goyrim. Sukkot, so even one you're over. So Memela, the pshat in the brisa is Bal Ta'acher, but along the way we can go and extrapolate that Relazar Reb Shimon who permits you to bring on Sukkot to bring a carbon. The Toida, which is a neder, he holds neder v'nedarim kareivim beyond it. And the Tanakamu says you can't bring on Atzeres. Why can't you bring on Atzeres? You can't bring Pesach because it's chametz. You can't bring a Toida on Shavuos. Why? Because ain't craving beyond it. That's the machlokes Tanoim. So that's the same machlokes between the brisa we spoke before and Rishon ben Elazar. Guys, good? I think it was very good. Now let's do a little more. In the brisa we said. You're yotzah because of simcha, you're not yotzah chagiga. Okay, it's always good to kill two birds with one stone. In other words, if I give tzedakah and tzedakah will be accepted for my tuition, that would be great, right? I'm going ahead, I'm paying my tuition with tzedakah. I have to go ahead and separate my maisa money anyway. If I take my maisa money and I go ahead and pay tuition with it, I'm killing two birds with one stone. I have maisa sheni money. I have a carbon set aside. Can I use that for karbanis? In other words, I say I make a neder, bli neder, I'm going to bring a carbon. I have my Maisa Sheni money. Can I go up to Yerushalayim, take that Maisa Sheni money, which I have to Yerushalayim anyway, and bring a carbon with it? And the answer is no. You have to bring a carbon from Chayva. It has to be from Chulin. It can't be from Maisa Sheni money. In addition, if I have to bring a carbon, can I use my carbon Chayva to be a carbon Nedava to be yaitz my carbon chiyuv? So, for example, I make a neder to bring what a shlomim. Can I use that for my shalmi chagiga? I have to bring the shalmi chagiga, right? Can I go ahead and be yaitz with that? And the answer is no. So, what did the brisa say? With the toida, which is a neder nedava, I can't use it for my chagiga, but I could use it for my simcha, because simcha is not a chayiv. For the Gemara, it's pashut. Of course, you can't use it for your chagiga. You can't go ahead and use money, that kodesh tika money. You can't use ma'aser sheni, and you can't use a carbon to be yotzei chiyuv. The yotzei says the brisa the yotzei mishum simcha v'eni yotzei mishum chagiga. Pshita davar shebechayvahu. The shalmei chagiga is the davar shebechayva. Chol davar shebechayva ain't a ba element achulin. It has to come from chulin money. You can't go ahead and come from a chayva. It can't come from a neder. It can't come from your toida. So it's the afagav the parish, even though you explained. Look, Banam Rashi, the afagav the parish, the kashenada hatoida, when he made a neder to bring a toida, pirish, he explained, amanashi yoytze b'yidei chagigasai. I guarantee you, people didn't make a neder, take a carbon and zoom up to Yerushalayim each time they made a neder. They would gather them together, and when they came b'shas hamayah, they'd bring them up. So I have a toida, and I say the following. I know when I get to Yerushalayim, b'shas the regel, I'm going to have to bring a carbon a chagiga. So let me do the following. I'm separating this toida conditionally, a neder, to be yaitz of that. Maybe you can make such a neder. Says the Gemara, the afagav the parish, even though you made what, such a neder, you're such a tanai. And this, in fact, was a conversation, a question answer that Reish Lakish, a question posed to Rabbi Yochanan. A person says it's upon me to bring a toida, that's a neder. And I'll be yoytze ba my chiyav chagiga. Or a person says hareini nazir, I am a nazir. And the day that I go ahead and shave, where I have to bring 3 other karbanos, I'll go ahead and be yoytze my ma'aser sheni. I'll use ma'aser sheni money to buy it. Mahu, what's the din? That's what the question that Reish Lakish posed to Rabbi Yochanan. So Amalei Nador, ve'eni yaitza. It's a carbon taida, and he's not yaitza chagiga. Nazir, he's a nazir, ve'eni megaleach, and he can't shave and bring the karbonis on the ma'aser sheni money. So you see, so that's the chiddush of the brisa. That despite the fact that the shots he separated the toida, he said, "I'm bringing it for the chagiga," it doesn't work. It's interesting. Toisus over here. Nazir ve'eni megaleach, v'dafka dekama hachi in that order. Dafki says, "I'm separating this on purpose to be megaleach." Avalamamar ibcha, the opposite. Al minas she'etzim mishum chagiga. Al minas, I'm separating this. Al minas she'etzim mishum chagiga. Harlei toida. In other words, it switches the order. I want to be yotzim chagiga by bringing a toida v'chein benazir. Then it's the shaila whether you be yotzim or not. It depends how you learn Taisvis. One people says Taisvis you could. Another one says you can't. But either way, it's not so pashut. The order plays a role. I'm separating al minas for this versus I'm bringing a chagiga only because of this. Okay, says the Gemara Vaita. Who Gavra? There was this individual. He was I think he was dying, and he wanted to marry off his son. And in the Amalu he says Havle arba meas zuzei leploini. I'm giving 400 zuz to so and so. Lenasiv barte that his daughter should marry my son. That's what he's saying. I'm giving that this daughter should go ahead, Rod, and he'll marry my daughter. No, excuse me. I said the wrong shot. Not my son. He's giving $400 to so and so to marry his daughter. In other words, a guy's dying and says, "I'm giving Harry $400 and what? And he marries my daughter." So I'm gonna papa arba mea shakel. Harry gets 400 ubarte, and the daughter boy nasibi boy loy nasibi. He wants to marry, and he wants to marry. He has a choice. He doesn't have to marry her. Time of the Amar, because first he said, Havalei ulinasif. First he said, give it and then marry. Avalam Amar, this is what Taisus is pointing out. Avalam ulinasif. If he marries her, then vahavilei, in that order, if he marries her and then he'll get the money, then he nasif. If he marries her, shakel will take the money. If he loy nasif, loy shakel. If he doesn't marry, he doesn't take the money. Okay, very, very nice Gemara. Chacham Gemara. It'll continue Bez Hashem tonight. Bez Hashem say share a second time, 8:15 in Shul.